The opinions expressed by the host and guests in this show are not necessarily the views of Children's Health Defense.
Good morning, CHD. It is Monday, the 9th of March, 2026. Well, let's pull up this headline for a second because we're going to discuss this in depth. CDC issues travel advisory for 32 countries, including several in Europe, over something that they say is paralytic and very scary. And they're telling people to go and get the polio vaccine. Well, who better than to get to talk about this nonsense is Dr. Suzanne Humphries. Good morning, Dr. Suzanne Humphries.
Good morning, Polly.
Right, so what's that all about, apart from scaremongering and ridiculousness?
Well, yes, you can't just ask me a simple question and get a simple answer, right? So Polly sent me this article yesterday, and I just have to dig in deeper and pull up a lot of stuff to show you exactly, because sound bites don't really work for us, do they, Polly? We need to have more facts and ammunition behind us. So I created this little slideshow that maybe Lou can bring up the first slide. And they want us to think that polio is taking over the world. So let's have a look at what's really happening in the world. And so the next slide, that's it, shows you, just a little screenshot from the article. So Polly, tell us again what the title of the article actually is.
It's the CDC issues travel advisory for 32 countries, including several in Europe, over spread of paralyzing disease.
Right. So the message to the public is that there's a spread of a paralyzing disease. They are focusing on the U.S. Center for Disease Control, the CDC, over issuing a level 2 alert, which cautions travelers to practice enhanced precautions before visiting these named 32 countries. So the message is there's a crippling and potentially deadly disease, despite the reality that 95% of people who contract polio don't even have any symptoms. So let's go on to the next slide here. And in case you think that Polly and I are just picking on the rag called People magazine, there were actually many news outlets that took the opportunity to spread fear. But I think Fox News's version kind of edges out the others by most aggressively linking the routine level 2 update to spring break excitement, using emotive words around risk and paralysis so that they can grab some attention. All right, the next slide, slide 4. This is how they keep stating there's a circulating poliovirus. This is the Fox News report, one of them. There were 2 of them. So we'll have a look at what type of circulating virus they find. Should we, Polly?
Yes, please.
But next, I just have to throw this in because a point heavily made in the article, the next slide, that's it, good. In the article from People is that vaccine hesitancy is on the rise. Now, remember, we are not allowed to have any doubts about the safety of the vaccine, no matter how well-founded it is. And this is from the Federal Register that I always bring up from 1984, discussing the controversy that was going on around the polio vaccine. And this was issued to every public health department, not to the general public, just telling them no doubt is allowed to exist. Well, that has not changed, but let's look at the foundation of the news. So the next slide shows us the CDC's page, which shows us a level 2 practice enhanced precautions. Now, note, the message is always to take more vaccines and to believe that vaccination is the only way forward. Well, at the bottom, you'll see that before travel to any destination listed below, adults who previously completed the full routine polio vaccine series may receive a single lifetime booster of polio vaccine. So my question is, why is a lifetime booster needed? Weren't the previous 3 boosters lifetime boosters? And how long does a lifetime booster work for? So if I'm on spring break at age 22, will I then never be asked again to take another polio jab? So what did change recently on the CDC website? Okay, so there was addition and expanded inclusion of several European countries to the list of destinations where poliovirus has been detected in the past 12 months. And this included Finland, Germany, Poland, Spain, United Kingdom, covering England, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland. And some reports also mentioned Kenya and others in passing. So, yes, so now you have right there the CDC map provoking those recommendations. So what they tell you is that what you can do to prevent polio is you can get the vaccine, be up to date. So let's look at the European countries. And, you know, one thing I didn't mention to you, and maybe it'll come up again later, but this level 2 practice to enhance precautions from the slide before, that has been there for years. We have not had a level 1. I can't remember where there was a level 1. So the level 2 is not new, okay? All they did was they added a few of those European countries in and issued an update. But what the mass media is promoting is that it was increased to level 2 and we have to practice enhanced precautions and that we need to be getting jabbed before going on spring break or having any fun in Europe, okay? Good. Okay, Lou. So let's go back to that one you were just on, slide 8. So this shows that there are no reported cases in Finland, which is one of the countries on the new list, and that the last case was in 1985. But there's a mutated vaccine derived in wastewater, but instead of that being terrifying, it's just said to indicate that surveillance is working. They're detecting it because surveillance is working. Finland is compliant with vaccines with a 98% child vaccine coverage with a vaccine that cannot prevent the spread of polio at all. Now, if you don't know, the injectable vaccine that they're telling you to get, the IPV, is put into your muscle and you will have antibody provocation. It does not stop you swallowing a virus. It does not stop you pooping the virus or passing it on to anybody else, okay? So if polio isn't a risk for the Finns, despite mutated vaccine virus in their water, as they talk about, why is it a risk to fully vaccinated Americans? That's my question. Are the Finnish health authorities suggesting that Finns should get boosted before they go out their front door? No, they're not. Let's go to the next slide. Oh, so this is from Germany. Oh dear, you know, they found wild polio in the sewage in Germany. And continuing on with this, I'll give you the link there, but the next slide goes into a little more detail. And note that last sentence. This is what caught my attention. It says, the Institute added on Wednesday that the risk to Germany's general population from either form of poliovirus was very low due to widespread vaccination coverage and because cases of virus detected in wastewater were only isolated, okay? Cases of virus detection in wastewater were only isolated. They weren't human cases, but they're calling them cases because they love that word, cases. Except, of course, in 2020 and onwards, when all isolations without infection were, quote, cases. So I'll let the virus deniers deal with these people. But I'm going to ask, if polio is no risk to Germans, why does the CDC think it's a risk to fully vaccinated Americans? All right, next slide, slide 11. Bad Poland. Let's look at bad Poland, who is also on the list. There is one vaccine-derived wastewater sample in 2024, and unlike Finland, where that was just, as we just saw, evidence of great surveillance and nothing to worry about, in Poland, it indicates the importation of virus and triggers alerts. The very same thing. The only difference is that Poland has only an 86% vaccination rate in 3-year-olds. They gave the magic number 95% needed to prevent community spread, even though the IPV injection does not prevent spread. So again, it's all about messaging. You get different messages even when you have the same data. Okay, the next slide, slide 12, we're going to talk about Spain because they're also now on the list. And Spain has vaccine virus in the wastewater and imported cases, which is fine because the imported case wasn't from a Spaniard. And Spain is safe because they reached over the magic number of 95% vaccination. So if polio is no risk to the 98% vaccinated Spanish people, despite having vaccine virus in the wastewater and a case of vaccine polio from a traveler, why does the CDC think it's a risk to fully vaccinated Americans? Hint, because Spain is good and has 98.2% vax rate. All right, so the next slide, 13. Okay, UK is on there now on the list. So as in the past, the UK continues to find vaccine-derived polio samples in the wastewater and circulation in communities since 2022. The message, what is it? It's to give more IPV, the injectable polio vaccine that doesn't prevent transmission. Between 2022 and 2026, it says, no cases despite these environmental detections. They will say it's because people have personal protection from their injections, right? But if you investigate other countries, you will find the same sort of data. Just on the basis of analysis of one column on the map of Europe and UK, the new CDC advisory ranks as clickbait, in my opinion, okay? So let's look at the CDC information on polio itself. Next slide. And we've been through this before. This has been on the CDC website in the past. I don't know if it's actually still there, quite honestly. I hope that it still says the same exact thing, but this is what we used in Dissolving Illusions. Approximately 95% of persons infected with polio will have no symptoms. About 4 to 8% of infected persons have minor symptoms such as fever, fatigue, nausea, headache, flu-like symptoms, stiffness in the neck and back, and pain in the limbs, which often resolve completely. Fewer than 1% of polio cases result in permanent paralysis of the limbs, usually the legs. Of those paralyzed, 5 to 10% die when the paralysis strikes the respiratory muscles. So what other vaccine-targeted illnesses do you know of that is asymptomatic in 95% of those colonized or as so-called infected? And I think the question that's never been answered properly is what really caused the small proportion of problems with the virus that was asymptomatic in 95% of those infected. And we address this in Dissolving Illusions, and it's probably one place where the virus deniers and I can find some common ground. So let's look at the next slide, 15. Polio, a paralyzing disease, is spreading. And so why are we told there is an upward trend? Because of a vaccine-derived poliovirus types circulating and found in wastewater. That's why, okay? Not because cases of people becoming paralyzed. It's because the so-called health workers also, as you can see here, can't control Afghanistan and Pakistan. And the third point there being that previously labeled polio-free areas are finding polio in their poop water despite no paralysis cases of note. And they always say it's due to under-vaccination. They won't tell you that vaccine-associated paralytic polio, also known as VAPP, is well known as the price that we have to pay for the eradication of polio. So let's talk about VAPP a little bit. The next slide is a paragraph from Dissolving Illusions 10th Anniversary Edition, page 420. And the quote is there, and I'm just going to read out the highlights. And they talk about that every year 60 children could develop VAPP because of the vaccine. This was considered the price to be paid for polio eradication, and the information was guarded as a secret from the public because doctors had been advised to restrict the discussion regarding VAPP to academic circles only so that pulse polio immunization may not be affected. And later, this figure was revised up to 202. The incidence of VAPP was indeed more than 3 times the projected figure of 60 cases per year. So there you have it from the quote in 2006. Okay, the next slide. This graph was also used in Dissolving Illusions, and it used to be available on the World Health Organization website, and many of us were using it to prove a point, and then the graph was removed, and no such data collection in this particular fashion exists anymore. So what we're looking at here is on the left side, you can see that there's 10,000 up to 110,000 cases of paralysis in the country. It's called acute flaccid paralysis, okay? So if you look at those 2 top lines, you know, the green and blue lines, those are cases of acute flaccid paralysis. And if you look at that bottom line, kind of the red and blue lines, those are cases of wild polio. All right, so you can see that wild polio down at the baseline and cases of acute flaccid paralysis, which would have been polio in the past, were on the rise. So as long as it's not an issue with the wild strain of poliovirus, nobody really seems to care. And that's really what the news media is all about. They don't care that the wastewater has vaccine virus in it and once in a while has wild polio virus in it. They just care that people aren't taking up vaccines and vaccine hesitancy is on the rise. And the trend we're told here is that in this graph here, that upward trend of AFP is just due to better surveillance. It's not because there was actually more polio paralysis, more paralysis. It's because there was enhanced surveillance. But that's also incorrect. Let's go to the next slide. So this is a screenshot from an article that came out of India in 2008, and you can't find this even on the Wayback Machine anymore. In 2008, the paralysis increase in children here was discussed, and it says that the potency of the vaccine was a possible reason for that. And unlike the older vaccine that had all three strains, the P1 vaccine, as they call it, which had type 1 polio vaccine virus in it, is 5 times more concentrated, and it was not tested before being used. And I just want to add in that type 1 polio is the most likely strain of all three to paralyze. Okay, so they increased that strain significantly. They concentrated it in that vaccine, the most dangerous strain, potentially dangerous strain. So epidemiologists said the government has changed the parameters of identifying polio. And so this article quotes Dr. Jacob Puliel, who is involved in the studies that I'm about to talk about. He's one of my heroes, actually. And so doctors rely on stool tests, he said, instead of physical signs of paralysis. So when they're checking for polio, they're not doing examinations necessarily. They're looking at stool tests to verify if it's polio virus, okay? But if the virus isn't kept cold, it will die. So that means that even though the child is paralyzed, it may not be declared polio affected because they wouldn't be keeping the samples cold. I'm assuming that's what he means. But it's a very interesting commentary there. So let's go on to the actual data, scientific articles in the next slide, 20. So this graph is also from Dissolving Illusions, and it shows acute flaccid paralysis in India from 2001 to 2017. And let's just, an aside, I'm using India as the example because we have so much data there. It's such a huge population. Polio paralysis, I should say, paralysis has been a huge problem. And there have been some, kind of whistleblower doctors that are really, they're not anti-vax. They just are seeing like something really problematic that they have measured it and written about it. And so these graphs come from those articles. All right, so there was a ton of acute flaccid paralysis. It was just not noted specifically as polio because of the new definition. So here we're looking at the number of cases of acute flaccid paralysis in India from 2001 to 2017. And you can see that it was rising alongside with the World Health Organization graph that I just recently showed you. And then it started to come down a little in 2012, and we'll talk about that. But one of the things they talk about are these pulse polio immunization campaigns. And what they are they're campaigns established by the government of India, and they began in 1995 to eradicate poliomyelitis by vaccinating all children under the age of 5 against poliovirus. It involves setting up vaccine booths in all parts of the country, arranging employees, volunteers, and vaccines, vaccinating children with OPV on national immunization days. And we probably all remember seeing Bill Gates putting the 2 little drops in the little brown kid's mouth. That was a part of the campaign with the advertisements and these good people doing that. And here we can see the number of non-polio, meaning that they didn't find wild virus. Acute flaccid paralysis went very high around 2003. And then it peaked in 2012, and then it slowly came down. And as another aside, I just want to add that children that are identified with non-polio AFP, including vaccine-derived polio, as well as other causes, are at more than twice the risk of dying than those with wild polio infection, okay? And that comes from C. Sathimala, Sathymala, from an article, Polio Eradication Program in India, the Indian Journal of Medical Research, volume 125, 2007, pages 695 to 696. That's the reference. So the next slide is also from Dissolving Illusions, and this represents polio cases in India if acute flaccid paralysis cases were reverted back to the pre-1997 polio definition change. So here we're looking at 1974 to 2002, and all the original sources for this data are in the book. So by returning the acute flaccid paralysis cases to their initial pre-1997 polio definition, it's obvious, as you can see there, that the incidence of paralysis has actually markedly surged. Okay, so that's the green line. The blue line shows what they want you to see. They're okay with you seeing the green line on the left, but midway down in 1997, you see boom, 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 it just goes down. And that's when the Pulse Polio campaigns began and when they redefined polio. And you can see that if we use the old definition, that what actually happened is that those cases went up. So this graph underscores that the World Health Organization's polio eradication initiative, which it portrays as a triumphant success, correlates with worsening situations for millions of children that were subjected to that experiment, and they have paid the so-called price. All right. Now, next slide. The article from People magazine brought up Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Well, that's an easy one to talk about, isn't it? So they said, in some cases, polio can lead to paralysis, as it did with U.S. President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who needed a wheelchair after he contracted the disease. And here we see the picture of Roosevelt in the wheelchair with the child. If you can see the child also has a brace on her right leg. So the next slide, please. So there was a pediatrician named Armand Goldman and his team. They did a full review of FDR's medical records, and they determined that his 1921 paralytic illness was likely caused by something called Guillain-Barré syndrome, which is an autoimmune disease, rather than the original diagnosis of poliomyelitis. And their analysis cited the illness's symmetrical ascending paralysis, age of onset, and lack of the typical polio symptoms. And you can find more details of that in the actual article. So while he was treated for polio, the 10 to 13-day progression of symptoms was more consistent with an autoimmune disorder. So they really need to ditch that commentary about FDR having polio, because it simply wasn't the case. Yet he was kind of the poster man for polio. It was kind of maybe just convenient that he had crippling disease, because he was used as one of the faces of polio. Okay, so the next slide. This is another clip from the People article, and it says that vaccination hesitancy is on the rise, contributing to the spread of the once nearly eliminated disease. Health and Human Services head Robert Kennedy Jr.'s lawyer and ally, Aaron Siri, petitioned the FDA in 2022 to revoke approval of the polio vaccine, which eradicated the disease in the U.S. Now, what they want you to believe is that Robert Kennedy had anything to do with the petition to the FDA, which he didn't. They also want you to believe that Aaron Siri is like his dedicated, committed lawyer, which he's not. And they want you to believe that we had this disease eradicated, and now here's Robert Kennedy, this complete loon, that's been hired on as secretary of HHS, and he wants to revoke all polio vaccines and let polio just come back and eat up children. Okay, that's the message that they want you to have. And it's complete misinformation. It's a repetition of misinformation about what really happened. So let's look at what really happened on the next slide. I have it outlined for you. And that is that there was a New York Times misinformation article which related to the petition from 2022. All right. And as I said, the petition had nothing to do with Kennedy whatsoever. It was for a specific, it basically was a petition filed through ICAN using Aaron Siri as the attorney. Okay, so it was a specific polio vaccine, not all polio vaccines, one specific vaccine, which was the standalone polio vaccine called IPOL, licensed to Sanofi. All right. The vaccine that we're talking about that was petitioned would have still been available for adults and still been available off-label for children, all right? And it asked for the withdrawal or suspension of approval for that vaccine for use in infants, toddlers, and children until a proper trial was done and there was an amendment to the label, all right? The petition notes that Vero cells are susceptible to it. So Vero cells are African green monkey cells, all right? And they note that virus cells are susceptible to infection by many viruses, and they are HPV, measles, rubella, reovirus, SV40, all kinds of viruses, which is why those cells are used to cultivate vaccine virus, because they're so susceptible, okay? So it's also in the monkeys they're susceptible, not just in the laboratory dish. So vaccines are said to undergo rigorous pre-release testing for all adventitious infectious material. That's what these would be considered. So if there's a virus that you didn't want in there that came along for the ride, that's called an adventitious infectious material. However, potential adventitious viruses could theoretically enter via the raw materials. So remember, when you're making vaccines and you're cultivating these cells from the African green monkey, you have to separate the cells, and they use trypsin, which basically comes from pigs, and animal-derived serums. And adventitious viruses could come from laboratory handling, or it could even come from low-level persistence in the monkeys that was below level for detection. There are also residual traces of different chemicals from production, which the petition addressed: the neomycin, streptomycin, polymyxin B, calf, bovine, serum, albumin, et cetera. All right. So the vaccine that we're talking about was licensed based on a clinical trial that reviewed safety for how many days? 3 days after injection. And there was no control group. Unfortunately, the petition remains pending with no public indication of a final decision. So, to me, the potential adventitious agents and chemicals really aren't the worst potential problems, all right? I'll tell you what mine are. Let's go to the next slide, slide 25. So this vaccine uses what's called an immortal cell line, which basically is a cancer cell, right? And this particular line supposedly spontaneously evolved and was isolated for use. And so that's what we're using. They got these African green monkey cells, which spontaneously had this mutation, which makes them continue to divide infinitely. Of course, you have to add the serums and everything else from other animals to do that. So how did it mutate? Well, there were genetic deletions, and those genetic deletions made it attractive for vaccine production. And one of those deletions on chromosome 12 removed tumor suppressors involved in cell cycle regulation. And loss of these helps bypass normal growth controls and contributes to immortalization. Okay, so we have loss of a tumor suppressor, something like what SV40 does, but it doesn't involve SV40. And this is a good thing because we can now use these immortalized cell lines to make vaccines in these big vats that where traces of them, these immortalized cells, can end up in your final vaccine product. So let's go to the next slide, 26. Are there risks of using immortal cell lines? Well, we're told that there are only extremely low amounts of residual DNA. Can these integrate into vaccine recipients? The answer is yes, they can. There is a risk. We're told the risk is low due to strict limits on host cell DNA to less than 10 nanograms per human dose. And we're supposed to believe that there is such good purification and surveillance that this very low regulated amount is always met. And that safety trials look at possible effects of even this little amount. Next slide, please. But now we have to ask the question, were there any long-term placebo-controlled or case-control studies for this concern? And when I ask this to AI, the answer is no. The trial primarily involved looking for antigenicity and short-term safety in 700 participants, no placebo arms, and mostly looking for immediate effects. Carcinogenicity was not evaluated. Let's go to the next slide. So in reality, when independent researchers check, they find much higher amounts of host cell. That would be like the African green monkey cell, or the fetal cell lines that are also used are called host cell, the host cell DNA, than 10 nanograms per dose. So this is from Dr. Teresa Deischer's team from probably a decade ago now. And they looked at MMR, hepatitis A, and varicella vaccines that are produced on human fetal cell lines like WI38 or MRC5, and discovered that the fetal cell DNA levels in vaccines ranged anywhere from 142 nanograms to a top figure of 2,000 nanograms per dose, not 10,000 nanograms or less. And she was actually looking at the potential of that to integrate into a child's genetic cells, the genes in the cells, and potentially be contributing to autism. But now we have a more updated look at this in the next slide from Kevin McKernan. And Kevin McKernan, Speicher, and Rose have shown numerous times just how bad the situation really is regarding residual plasmid DNA and residual SV40 fragments. So remember, the COVID vaccine was made in E. coli, and in this, which is basically poop bacteria, and they naturally have plasmids in them, and those plasmids, which is it's a loop of DNA, can be adjusted and manipulated to make the cell produce certain things. So that's why we are looking now at plasmid DNA, and we were told that there wouldn't be any, and then we were told there would be a 10 nanogram limit, the magic 10 nanogram limit. And so these researchers found 627 times the 10 nanogram limit. And I would just say that if you have time, please read this full slide later and look into this in more detail, because it's an absolute nightmare. What McKernan and Rose have turned up is startling. What's even more startling is the FDA's response, which is pretty much nothing. So the FDA, when it does respond via public statements, will just say things like, the limits are precautionary and not absolute, and the agency views these claims as theoretical misinformation without clinical evidence consistent with ongoing safety monitoring. There's no ongoing safety monitoring. They say that long-term use of these vaccines have not shown any signal for cancer, despite the fact that they have never even looked. Okay, so the last slide here, I took this off of, obviously it's got a watermark on it, but it makes the point. So I just want to say that the CDC, the World Health Organization, Darpa, Gates and friends and all these people and the vaccine industry know that hundreds of millions of people woke up during COVID and they became vaccine hesitant, if not all out anti-vaxxers. We've even got Joe Rogan now, on board talking about what happened to him during COVID. He woke up during COVID. He says that he used to make fun of anti-vaxxers, and now I think he's slowly kind of inching over going, yeah, I think these anti-vaxxers may have a point here. And, he had me on his show, so that says something. So the powers that be want to take the conversation away from COVID and back to the shots that so-called normal people previously considered good, like polio, and restore faith in the older vaccines. And we know that faith always died out with polio, which is why they had to bring that 1984 Federal Register in. And so this is done by falsehoods that are laced with fear, and these, for whatever reason, always seem to spread rapidly. These lies spread really rapidly, often before the facts can be even verified. People get terrified, they go off and they vaccinate. We've seen it with measles now in the Carolinas. So by the time the broader and deeper facts come out, which actually, takes a bit of a longer time to dig up and explain, other than these fear-based sound bites, the public's already been frightened into compliance, and then they start to defend their actions. So our job here at CHD, and my job as a doctor that's just, trying to find the truth in everywhere that I go with no stake in this whatsoever, our job is to make sure that facts and balancing information is spread far and wide, and that the doubt that's cast upon vaccination by the COVID debacle actually grows, and that people do real research and fact-finding and make informed decisions wherever they are. And so my call to the audience here is to share the facts that you learned here today, make clips of this video, spread it around, get the word out. And with that, I'll end, and thank you for listening.
That was brilliant. Because I was that person. Remember, I vaccinated Toby, my youngest. Even though I knew about vaccine injury, someone said to me, oh, your child is going in the pool, they're going to pee out their vaccines and your son is going to be crippled like my dad or something like that. And I shot him along to go and get a vaccine, polio vaccine. But of course, he got a ton more while he was at it. So what I'm saying is I understand that fear. So that's why I wanted to bring you on and categorically say to the people, do not be afraid. This is fear-mongering, pharmaceutical, paid crap. right?
Absolutely. Fear, unless you're being chased by a wild animal or some, a crazy human, it really doesn't have much to serve us anymore. What it should do is if you start to feel fear, what your next move should be is, okay, stop. Let me sit and look through this. Let me think about this. I mean, I don't know about you, Polly, but when I first started researching vaccines in 2008, you could find stuff that talked truthfully about vaccines pretty much everywhere. And now you can hardly find it anywhere. And that's why I think places like CHD are really important, because it's really a treasure trove of, the quote other side, which, we have nothing to lose but our reputations, our lives have been threatened and everything else. So if that doesn't make you realize that, there's something bigger going on here that we need to pay attention to, if the fact that the USA has one of the most unhealthy childhood population, the highest vaccine rate, that fear, if you feel it, you must be motivated to learn more rather than to go and jump to do something that you can't undo.
Quite right. And let's just talk about our time when we traveled around America and other countries and taking vaccine injury stories. The paralysis is everywhere. Look at Josh's boy who was paralyzed from the waist down. And then I can't tell you on the last tour how many stories I did of crippled children with polio. That's got to be polio, with feeding tubes going down, sucking out the stuff from their lungs while they were talking to us. I mean, I have never seen so many crippled. I did not know so many crippled children were out there, Dr. Suzanne.
That's awful. Remember that boy in Utah that ended up killing himself? He was a BMX biker, really strong and fit, and he got a Gardasil vaccine. Colton, right? And these aren't just one-offs. Like, we saw so much of it. We saw way more than the CDC lists on their website.
I know, and the level of this behavior, the severity of the so-called autism from these vaccines was like something that we've never seen before. It was, in a way, petrifying. And I don't know how these mothers do it. And I know we're going slightly off on a tangent, but people need to understand, when you are in fear, like I was with my last child, and went and you are literally putting that child, in my opinion, in way, way more danger than polio, measles, mumps, rubella, I don't care what it is, could ever give you. I'm sorry. I don't care what the press says. After what we've seen on the bus, you would never vaccinate if you traveled with Dr. Suzanne and myself on the bus.
Right. And it's still easy to find the package inserts and look at the ingredients. It's actually, as of now, you can still find them. But like I said, you have to go to the sources that are going to give you the information. You're not going to find it from People magazine. Isn't it amazing? Like like, we know that, like, all these Hollywood stuff is just, insane now. We know that. But now they're jumping on the bandwagon. It's all one big happy family. The financial institutions, Hollywood, all these people that we used to, entertain us, they're all in on the gig here. So, you're in charge of looking after your own child. The safety of that child is in your hands, not some superstar from People magazine or anybody else that you might be listening to, even your neighbor. It's your hands. Because what else did we find, Polly? What else did we see? Did we see that the vaccine adverse reporting system reported these cases that we saw on the road? Did we see that these people were compensated? No. What we saw is that people who have children with vaccine injuries, they get divorce rate is very high. They become broke because they will literally do anything to try to restore the health in those children, which they mostly cannot do. They can maybe to some degree, and we did see occasionally full success, very, very rare. So don't feel like you can undo this. You've got to think about it before you do it. It's not undoable.
No, and actually, Lou, I think it would be really good to play the Gardasil section of Vaxxed 2 after this interview so people can see Colton's story, the story that you were talking about. But I want to just quickly touch on virus deniers, as soon as you mention them, if you don't mind, because we get attacked by them a lot. They write to us a lot, and they're quite aggressive, not very friendly at all. To us, they're not anyway. And to them, please don't keep writing to me. I'm not a doctor. I can't help you. Or a scientist. Go keep writing to Brian Hooker. He doesn't like it, but that's the science department. But should we talk about what happened to me recently with my grandchildren? Should we talk about that for just a second?
Sure. What happened, Polly?
Well, so I went to stay with my grandchildren, and the nearly 2-year-old girl was sick. She had flu, whatever you want to call it, green snot coming out of her, lots of mucus. She was sick, but then her mum was having a baby, so I slept in bed with her, just Granny and my little 2-year-old. And in the middle of the night, she got up and she vomited mucus all over my head. Yes, she did. Um, and it was, she's only 2, so she's little, but it was pretty gross. And that happened. And when I came to the house, I said to my daughter, well, she said to me, look, be careful, because we were quite sick. We've got this like horrible flu. And I said, don't worry, I never get sick. So I really don't ever get sick. I'm so fit and strong. Well, anyway, a couple of days later, started to get a sore throat, started to get ill. And now I'm still ill. It's been going on for ages. But just to the virus deniers, explain that. Explain the throw up over my head, her wiping her big green snot all over my face and arms and blah, 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 all over me and me kissing and cuddling her. And then I got sick. So how was that? What would they say to that, Suzanne?
They would say that there's never been a virus isolated and shown on an electron microscopy, which, people who do take these pictures would say is false. And since I don't have an electron microscope or a laboratory that can do that, I really can't firsthand comment. I have to look at all the volumes of virology literature through the ages, especially looking at things like, the smallpox and polio virus and measles virus. There's a whole book written about the flu virus, which is actually quite interesting. I did find it quite interesting because they talk about contagion. The problem I have with being attacked by virus deniers is that they can't tell us what is happening. They just want to tell us what is not happening. And I happen to think that Del Bigtree handled the situation quite brilliantly recently on the High Wire. But the segment ended with the same thing. It's like they can't tell us what did happen. So what they're saying, what the virus deniers are saying, is that we are conflating. They love that word. That we're conflating the symptom that you had with a virus that was transmitted from one person to another, which they say has never been proven. And they'll tell you that there's all kinds of experiments that have been done throughout the decades past where they try to spread colds and flus amongst people, and the transmission rate is very low. And so they try to bring in other possible explanations like humidity and barometric pressure or consciousness and expectation or fear, it's actually a very interesting idea. And I think the studies that were done were actually very interesting. And I think that there is something to be said for the fact that when you're afraid of something, you're more likely to get it. And yes, there are psychogenic illnesses that can happen. That said, you're sitting there going, I'm good, I never get sick. And you don't. It's true. I mean, we were all sick as could be in Australia, and you and Anu were just like happy as, well, we're stuck in this horrible van for how many, 10 days. We're dying, and the two of you are happy as can be. You didn't get it. You usually don't get sick. Here, you don't think you're going to get sick. So it wasn't your expectation. Your expectation was not to get sick, and you got sick. So the question is, what happened? Was it a toxin? That's the other thing that they want to talk about, that it's a toxic release, that what they're looking at under the microscope is not virus, that it's toxin release. So to me, I think that there's a lot of corruption in virology. I think there's a lot of bad science in virology. Especially when it comes to COVID and HIV, both relating to Anthony Fauci, who's an absolute criminal, in my opinion. But when it comes to measles and when it comes to chickenpox, these diseases of childhood that children would get one time, not 5 times like the flu or a cold virus, but one time. And then they created a shot for it called a vaccine. And that shot interrupted transmission to the place where, your grandchildren are going to have a little trouble picking up these illnesses if your daughter wants them to, because the transmission rate was interrupted by whatever they put into these shots. So nobody can tell us what was put in the shots that would have done that. You can't say that it's humidity, barometric pressure, fear, or toxin, especially toxin. That's what they keep going back to, toxin, because it's a once in a lifetime. And there was this natural experiment that happened in the Faroe Islands where the entire island was stricken with measles. And there was a very high mortality rate because the first time an illness sweeps through a virgin population, it's very bad. But once they develop what's called herd immunity, it's not so bad. But what was interesting in this particular situation was that they went decades without measles coming back in the island because it was an isolated place back at the time. And when measles did come back on the island, everyone who had it the first time didn't get it again. And the people that were younger and susceptible did get it. So I just can't get on board with the virus denying when it comes to this. Now, I because I don't have a lab, I can't show you what it is. I can't isolate it. Like they want us to isolate it and purify it, despite the fact that viruses do seem to require cells, living cells, in order to make more of themselves, in order to make the toxins, like something like diphtheria, for example. And I can't confirm or deny the presence of a particular virus. I have to rely on scientists, like there's a great pathologist named Dr. Hang Lee, who most people don't even deserve to kiss his feet knowing what he's been through. He's in Connecticut and he wrote a whole book on HPV vaccine. And I have to rely on people like Kevin McKernan who look at the genetic sequences, and they still rubbish these people, these very highly esteemed, well-established, non-mainstream, really hardworking scientists that are with us and trying to dig up the truth. I think there's contagion. Now, is contagion 100% when people are exposed? No, it's not. It's never been 100%, not even in susceptibles. We know that from back in the day. So if you're going to bring your child to someone's house that has measles, they might not contract measles because there are certain circumstances that have to be met clearly, because the soil, so to speak, the background health of a person has something to do with this is my opinion here speaking, your vitamin C levels, your vitamin D levels, your gut integrity, your immunity, your lymphatic system, your airway integrity, whether you're around smokers or not, which changes the airway integrity. Maybe the barometric pressure has something to do with it. Maybe the humidity has something to do with it. Maybe there are other factors. It's not cut and dry, but it's never been 100% contagion rate. So that's one of the problems. And then they want to just keep bringing back Koch's postulates. This was, basically a set of rules that were made a long time ago that were supposedly had to be met in order to call something an infectious disease. And one of those rules was that you should have to isolate it, and then you should be able to transmit it to another living creature, and then they should manifest the disease, and you should be able to isolate it and transmit it, et cetera, et cetera. And so the virus deniers say that hasn't been proven with cold viruses and influenza. I think it has been proven with measles. I think measles is now used as its therapeutic value. The actual infection has therapeutic value, so it's often used in experimentation and in oncology in order to increase interferon levels and battle cancer. And they've had some success with it. So the two that I just keep coming back to are chickenpox and measles, because I think that especially measles is a disease that has a benefit in the long run. And we go through this in great detail in Dissolving Illusions. So whatever that is that the vaccine interrupted, whatever that entity is, whether you want to call it a virus or not, I think that we should stop vaccinating for it. And I think that there's one place that the vaccine deniers and us have common ground, and that is that we want vaccination to stop, that we want the truth to come out, that we want mandates to be ended. And instead of fighting with each other and trying to destroy each other, and they come for me like really badly. They obviously come for Del, or he wouldn't have done the show. They come for you. And it's like they're waging war on us on the inside. And that's kind of what gets my hackles up. So I just think they should stop doing that. And they have a lot of followers now. And it's not the main leaders that are kind of nasty. It's the followers that have become really nasty, and they're very arrogant. And even though they haven't done any studies, they haven't done 1/1,000,000th of the amount of research that I've done into vaccination and infant immunity and contagion. They're so high on their horses about viruses don't exist. And if you think that they do, then you're just not keeping up with the times and you're ignorant. And it's like, okay, well, I guess we can agree to disagree on that. But how about if we just stop fighting and start fighting the common enemy, which is the vaccines and this misinformation about that putting poison into children, into pregnant women, into newborn babies, putting poison into them systematically is anything but a crime. That's all it is. It's a crime. Vaccination, in my opinion, is a crime. I don't believe that we should abolish all vaccines, because I do believe in some degree of freedom. But what you and I have noticed on the road is that the non-vaccinated children are the healthiest by far and wide, and that the families that have both non-vaccinated and vaccinated children can tell you every single time that their non-vaccinated children are healthier. You never see somebody tell you that they have part of their family vaccinated and part of them not, and those vaccinated kids are so much healthier. It's just not what we've seen. And to take, thank goodness they've stopped the recommendation for the hepatitis B vaccine at birth. But, you listen or read Aaron Siri's book called Vaccines Amen, and you read more about that hepatitis B vaccine, which I just finished reading the book. It's fantastic. And I got to say, like, the way he talks about the hepatitis B vaccine, it's absolutely startling that it was ever approved to give to babies. Absolute crime.
Yeah, Aaron Siri.
One day with babies.
Doing amazing work. So Dissolving Illusions, how can people get it? I highly recommend you all do. Please get that. It needs to be next to your Bible. Is that important?
Well, this is the 10th anniversary edition, which is much thicker and heavier and has about 200 more pages than the original edition. You can get both editions. I don't know why you'd want the old one now, but this you can get at dissolvingillusions.com. You don't have to buy it on Amazon if you don't want to. There are other options on the website. It's been translated into numerous languages. I think we're up to 9 or 10 languages right now, and it's all available. The easiest place is to go to dissolvingillusions.com, but you don't have to buy the book if you don't want to. You could just go look at the graphs. You can go look at the different tabs we have on the website, including criticisms that I have been addressed with and my answers to them. And a lot of information on how you can contact Roman, who's actually written a novel that's set back in, Victorian England and involves the smallpox vaccine. And it's quite a good little novel. And I think that's worth reading. And you can get a copy of that there as well.
All right. Well, Dr. Suzanne Humphries, thank you so much for all the work and research, for coming on today, to putting right the crazy nonsense in the press. And what we're going to do now is we're going to go and play the Gardasil section of Vaxxed 2, The People's Truth, and which will show Colton's story, which is what Dr. Suzanne was talking about earlier. It's a very important story for you all to watch. And so Dr. Suzanne Humphries, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Polly. Bye.
When these parents took their children, their teenagers, or themselves in for an approved shot. See the injuries that was done from an approved shot. And think about the fact that you're about to give yourself or your teenager, who you love very, very much, an emergency use authorization shot, not approved.
I predict that Gardasil will become the greatest medical scandal of all times, because at some point in time, the evidence will add up to prove that this vaccine has absolutely no effect on cervical cancer, and that the very many adverse effects which destroy lives and even kill serve no other purpose than to generate profit for the manufacturers. Former Merck physician.
What I understood about human papillomavirus is that it's an infection that comes and goes. And it's been around for a long time, and it's in many animals, including lizards and primates. It's not just in humans, that babies are born with it. So I was really surprised that here's this virus that's been around and so prevalent, and it's being blamed on giving cancers to people. And then what I found out was that those cancers are not necessarily solely attributed to this virus, but yet this virus was being targeted by a vaccine.
There's so many brilliant interviews that were done during the Vaxxed tour. But I will say that one of the memories that really stands out to me is the moment we pulled into Utah and Polly interviewed Colton Barrett and his mother.
So tell us what happened to you.
Well, Colton was a 13-year-old healthy, strong boy. He loved baseball, motorcycles, anything that has to do with an adrenaline rush. He was going to go to scout camp. For scout camp, you have to have a physical, so we went to the doctor's office, and the doctor says, hey, he's the age that you should get the HPV vaccine. I said, okay, how come? Well, it can help prevent cancer, and even if he's not promiscuous, he can still give it to his wife when he gets married. I said, oh, that sounds like a pretty good thing then. So he was administered the vaccine, and on the third round, 2 weeks after, he started having a really bad neck ache. The next day, he went motorcycle riding with his dad, And that day he came home, he was pale, starting to feel nauseous, really sore neck. He didn't feel good. He went to bed, and the next day I checked on him. He still didn't want to get out of bed. I just thought, man, you're just really weak and exhausted. And that evening, when he sat up to take a drink of water, he said, Mom, can you give that to me in my left hand? I can't use my right arm very good. It's weak. And he tried to lift up, and all of a sudden he just flopped back, and his head just hit the pillow, and I went, do you have spinal meningitis? You know, it was my first, really bad fear. So my husband took him in to Instacare Monday morning, February 17th, 2014, holding his head for him because he couldn't get out of bed. The paralysis just went down, down, down after the first 4 to 5 days. Where he was completely paralyzed from the neck down, had no movement at all.
Bolton, give me your eyebrows. You were doing them better than that other night. There you go. Show me yes. Show me yes. Show me no.
Yeah. But you have to have this breathing apparatus with you the whole time.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's about 15 pounds, so I always have to have someone with me to carry it. Get around.
It's a literal ball and chain for him.
And the whole time, watching this box on his side with this hose going into his throat, breathing for him to, and then he could speak, waiting for that breath to come from that box. And it was a realization that changed my life forever. I remember staring at this and watching this interview go on, and watching this box and thinking, we say we got rid of the iron lung.
His right arm is completely paralyzed. His left arm only has minimal function now. And he's lucky he's regained his legs and his core strength.
So the people who gave you this vaccine, where are they now? What do they say?
Our doctor is he's the doctor that delivered him. He's just a family practice doctor. I still like him. I am upset that he still wants to give the vaccine, but he will not give it to boys anymore. He's cautioning on girls to give it to girls, but
So he's not going to give the HPV vaccine to boys?
correct.
Colton, do you just realize how many boys that you just
it's
said?
good he's at least not doing it to boys, but lots of girls can still get hurt.
All right, so let's start by talking about your life before Gardasil.
I was more artistic. I wasn't into sports, although I did like to go jogging, do exercises whenever the weather was nice. Let's see.
Yeah, I was a competitive club soccer player. I was trying out for OGP, which is like playing for the state and stuff.
Soccer.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. She played year round, and on top of that, right around that time, she was running track, the 400, 800, and long jump.
Yeah.
Prior to the Gardasil shot, Corinne was academic excellence. She always great grades.
I was athletic, straight A's in school. Really no health issues before. And
what sport did you play?
Volleyball.
You were a volleyball?
Big volleyball player.
Basketball was my favorite. I played that from kindergarten up to my senior year of high school. And then I would play softball and volleyball.
Top honors in her high school, graduated top in her class. Top of that, she was a head cheerleader for 3 years, captain of the cheerleaders, won a national competition.
I did karate. I was almost a black belt. I could take down a 40-year-old black belt who used to spar with me.
We got the shots. She was accepted that summer into a high ballet school at the University of Irvine and could not dance.
Ballet, tap, jazz, hip hop, pretty much everything I could possibly do, I did.
I mean, she was doing really well in school, and she was really popular, and she actually had auditioned with Disney, and they wanted to fly her out to California, and she had a very promising future.
Yeah, I was really active. I started going to the gym with her probably age like 13.
4 or 5 times a week,
Yeah.
played volleyball.
So sleeping for a couple of days was out of character?
Completely.
She was playing basketball, she was doing track, She made varsity wrestling her freshman year and had a grip of friends. And her freshman year, that's when she got that HPV vaccine and everything changed for her. She was a straight A student. Everything she was doing was for scholarships. She was college bound. That's where she was going. And this destroyed that for her.
I had never seen a vaccine cause so much devastation as I had with the HPV vaccines.
The Gardasil vaccine is among the most injurious of any vaccination that's ever been manufactured in the United States.
Be it anecdotal or not, way too many cases and complaints of having neurological insults soon after that vaccine is given, even with the first dose.
Gardasil is probably the single worst mass vaccine that we've ever seen.
So what we were seeing was these really high-functioning teenagers ending up in wheelchairs, and some of them actually ending up dying or killing themselves. And I don't think you can ever justify that for an infection that comes and goes, that causes very little disease in and of itself, and something where Pap smears were doing such a good job. It really just didn't make any sense to me.
This vaccine targets millions of preteens and teens for whom the risk of dying from cervical cancer is 0.
They started talking to me about get my HPV shot, and I turned them down about 1 or 2 times.
This doctor sat down and badgered us for 45 minutes. They started showing me photos and saying that I'm gonna get this and that I need to take this shot.
Photos of what?
Photos of cervical cancer and just what it will happen if you don't get the shot, blisters and different things, and it scared me. I was scared. I didn't want that.
Every single time I went in, she was like practically shoving it down my throat.
The doctor literally scared me into taking this vaccine. I had said no twice before because it was too new.
You know, nobody in their right mind would ever take this vaccine if they actually read the clinical literature.
She pushed my buttons just enough, trying to make me feel like a bad mother if I didn't give Caitlin the shot. You know, do you want your daughter to get cervical cancer? Who wants their child to get cancer?
You need to get this vaccine. What's going to happen when you get cervical cancer and die?
Well, cancer is a scary word, so of course I started to listen.
Oh wow, oh my gosh, sign me up. I don't ever want to have cancer.
I was just afraid of the word cancer, so I thought, oh my God, I have to go get this, it's free. You know, I was young, I didn't know anything about this, so I just was like, okay, and just agreed to it.
The death rates in the Gardasil trials were 37 times the death rates for cervical cancer. Children who take that vaccine, the Gardasil vaccine, are 37 times more likely to die from the vaccine than they are to die from cervical cancer.
I really wasn't educated about Gardasil at the time, so I allowed the vaccination. The biggest mistake of my life.
So I go and get the first shot, and from what I was told by my doctor, I immediately went into a seizure. I was on the floor seizing, and then I just passed out cold.
So she had a baseline physical, but it was also the same day she got her second vaccination of Gardasil. The doctor detected a heart arrhythmia. In all of her 20 years, there had never been any heart arrhythmia. She never had any symptoms or any indication of any difficulty. No one in the family ever had a heart problem. So we were really surprised.
I started having severe leg pain. I couldn't move. I couldn't get up out of bed.
Could not move my arms. My leg joints would feel like my leg was about to come out, and it would be in like excruciating pain.
Moments where I couldn't move my legs.
She just matter-of-factly says, I can't walk. And I'm like, what are you talking about? She's like, my legs don't work.
Her legs in particular hurt really, really bad. Her hips and her knee joints were very, very painful. It would be like feeling paralyzed. Sometimes it was one leg, sometimes it was both legs.
And that was it. He never regained his ability to fully walk. We would go out. He would walk very, very little. And I would see his legs just start to collapse like an accordion.
She had lost the ability to walk. She couldn't see very well. Her vision was doubled.
I'm blurred. She couldn't read anymore. She began to regress. She became like a 9-year-old child.
They gave me my shots in my left thigh, and the last one hurt really bad. It felt like they were injecting fire in my leg.
She got the third shot. Within 2 weeks, she was hospitalized, and she remained hospitalized for 8 solid months.
She's been hospitalized 9 times in 26 months.
Hospitalized for what?
For extreme pain that is uncontrollable.
Where is your pain when you have it?
Absolutely everywhere.
Her first major symptom was excruciating head pain. Like the worst migraine you could ever have times 10.
My joints, my spine, my head especially.
She became light sensitive. She became sound sensitive. She had to be in a dark room.
Really, really bad migraines and dizzy spells and fatigue that was so severe that she couldn't even get out of bed that day.
Headaches. At first they started off slow, and then I started to get them like every day. And they would start in the back and work their way forward, very intense and distracting, like I couldn't really think straight. I got my period for the first time, and then it went away forever, like it never came back.
So she was diagnosed with a very rare disease called post-histoplasmosis fibrosing mediastinitis. In her right mediastinum, she has a 10-centimeter tissue mass. It's inoperable.
She has this. I'm sorry, Jeff.
We're just hoping it won't grow. We don't know. I mean, we're taking it day by day. It's by all her vitals, so they cannot do any operations to try to take it out.
She came down with pneumonia, bronchitis, 2 ear infections, a sinus infection, a throat infection, and constant thrush.
So much pain, right, even now. And I just wish someone would reach in my back and rip out my spine. I cannot take this anymore.
This is an NJ2.
What it does is basically it goes up my nose and near my throat, and it goes past my stomach into my jejunum, or the first part of the small intestine, because my stomach is completely paralyzed.
Your stomach is paralyzed?
Yes.
The NG2 wouldn't work, and we had to be put on a port for nutrition, which she was on for 3 years.
3 years?
The child never ate a meal for 3 years. And if that wasn't bad enough, if she had suffered enough pain, then she had this excruciating long bone pain in her legs. And we would have to ice her legs down to give her relief. And she was miserable. She was just miserable. And she would say to me, she'd say, I want to go home. And she'd be in this house and she would say, I want to go home. And she was talking about to be with the Lord.
I went in for a gynecologist appointment, got a pap smear, and they told me it came back abnormal. And I immediately started freaking out because I've never had one abnormal.
Very few doctors have ever heard of it. Nobody knows how to treat it. Anything they prescribe, she's a guinea pig. She's the initial guinea pig. So they put her on an immunosuppressant and itraconazole, which is an antifungal medication. I'll dump some of them out. This is what it looks like to be on Gardasil, the aftermath of it. And this is just one bag. We got about 15 more at home.
I said, okay. I said, so what does that mean about the abnormal cells? And she said, well, they're precancerous. And I said, cancerous for what? And she said, cervical cancer.
So we have to worry the rest of her life if the inflammation in her body is going to make that mass grow again.
I should have never got those shots because in my mind, I knew that they were what gave me HPV.
So the problem with Gardasil, like most vaccines, is it was never tested against a true placebo, an inert placebo. And CDC and HHS say, if you don't test it against a true placebo, it's not science.
A placebo is just an inert substance that doesn't cause any damage, that they give one group of individuals in a particular clinical study, and then they give the drug. That's the experimental group. They give that to another set of individuals. The people that were supposed to be the control group, they got aluminum. And when they did that, out of every 100 patients, they had at least 2 severe autoimmune events.
You have no way of gauging whether the injuries you're seeing from the product are being caused by that product or whether they're just bad, sad coincidences.
The CDC knew about this. Merck, the manufacturer of the Gardasil vaccine, knew about this. It's as plain as the nose on your face. All you have to do is look at the clinical trial data.
The entity that is actually performing the study and paying for the study is Merck. So Merck got to decide which injuries were being caused by Gardasil and which were just bad coincidences. And because it had that power, it just wrote them all off as bad coincidences. You can do that when there's no placebo, because the injuries they were seeing in the control group, where the girls were getting aluminum neurotoxins, were identical to the injuries they were getting in the Gardasil group. So they said, well, we don't have to report any of these as vaccine injuries. So they were able to license something that is insanely dangerous.
After all the struggles and fights, and we thought she was finally getting a little better, she went to sleep. She wasn't feeling good during the day, and I went in to check on her, and she looked like she was very still. She was in her bed, and she had passed away, and I tried to revive her, but she was gone. I loved her so much. I would have given my life for hers. She was just a good kid, and her mom made a bad choice.
The last hug I gave her, I was standing on the step hugging her, and I wanted her to stay longer. And she said, "No, Mom, I want to get back to school. Okay, I'll see you in a couple weeks." But in the interim, the police came to our door one night. So I said to them, "Is this about my daughter?" And they said, "Yes." And I said, "Was she in an accident?" They said, "No." They said they found her dead in her bed at school and that they didn't know what happened. And so, I don't know if anyone's ever had somebody
I think if there was one vaccine that should be eliminated out of the schedule immediately, and there would be absolutely no ramifications, no problems with diseases cropping up and people dying, that vaccine has to go.
So tell us from your point of view.
Well, it does suck, not being able to play sports anymore. Because I did do a lot of sports, and it was my favorite.
You're an awesome sportsman. We've just seen photos of you.
Yeah, I have to sit on the sideline, just watch everybody. But getting used to it, so it's not as bad anymore.
The one thing about Colton is he does always smile, and he's an awesome kid that way. He doesn't complain. You're good, huh?
Yeah, I guess.
This and all CHD TV programming is made possible by generous support from viewers like you. please consider making a contribution today to keep our programming going strong. Thank you.